Our next speaker is a spoken word poet. His name is Yevin Roh. Kevin is a poet who believes the personal is political and uses the spoken word to advance social justice, especially around the issues of race, gender, and challenging sexual violence. As an artist, he has opened for the slam poet legends Bo Siea and Franny Choi, and took home first prize at Mount Holyoke's 5-college slam competition in 2014. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Public Health and a certificate in Asian American Studies from UMass Amherst. Kevin is currently a medical student at UMass Worcester on scholarship from the United States Navy and serves on the board of Fallacies, a men's health education nonprofit and theater troupe. Please welcome Yevin Roh.
Thank you all. Ooh, I forgot how close I can get. So my name is Yevin with a Y. It must be a typo. It's very understandable. Your program has it right. And yeah, I'm a spoken word poet, medical student, so on and so forth. And I noticed that there's a lot of students in the audience, and I normally don't like to give my resume because I'm done applying to med school. That's over. You know, I don't need to talk about it anymore. But when I was at UMass Amherst, I was a student activist, student leader, and student government president. And I worked to rewrite the Code of Student Conduct to finally have a comprehensive sexual violence policy that has a definition of consent. Yeah, and that. Thank you. And that was only possible collaborating with our cultural resource centers for women on campus, and also for LGBTQ students as well. And I just wanted to put that out there because I don't, like the description says, the personal is political. This isn't just poetry to me, this is politics, this is action, this is advocacy. And I want to tell that especially to the students and young men out there, you know, your parents might try to pigeonhole you like studies in school, absolutely do that. You know, go hard in sports, so on and so forth. But it's possible to be multidimensional, right? And I just wanted to let you know about some of my accomplishments outside of, you know, what's been stated, because it's important that no matter how well you do in school, how well you do in sports, how well you do in life, you know, you got to keep at it, and it's possible to balance all these things. Just find the right balance for you. I've led a very privileged life, but I just wanted to throw that out there to let y'all know it is possible and encourage you to lead lives that complete every aspect of your character, right? You know, it's so. So before I get into the piece itself, a few asides. There's some Korean in here, so don't try too hard to sign it out. It's going to be difficult. There's references to the 38th parallel, and the 38th parallel is the border between North and South Korea. You'll understand why I make that reference later. I didn't realize that I needed to explain this. I usually perform in front of Asian audiences, but there's a double lid and a monolid. Many people from East Asia have a monolid. But many people who are not East Asian have a double lid. So come up to me after the show. I got one of each. You can compare. And if you know, or maybe get like one of your Asian friends to Snapchat you, you know, it's whatever. So there's a reference to a double lid and monolid. And in East Asian culture, generally the double lid is considered more beautiful. So that's important. I didn't realize I had to explain that until I ran this by some non-Asian friends. And I focus on Korean culture in this piece, but I want to stress that no culture has a monopoly on domestic violence, and that we're all responsible for handling domestic violence in our communities in culturally appropriate ways. And so I guess that's it. I'm going to get started. All right. There is only one Korea, even though it lives in two halves. The 38th parallel lives inside of every Korean. It lives inside of me. It lives on my face, one eyelid folded, the other a monolid. And I call my eyes Beauty and the Beast, not because one is more beautiful than the other, but each one was a gift from a parent who made up one half of an abusive relationship. My folded eye was a gift from a mother. My monolid was a gift from my father. But when you grow up with two Korean parents, it doesn't matter what you see, it matters what you say. And the most important Korean phrases I learned were yelled at me. No, 아빠 딱 비슷해. You are just like your father. And so I learned the most important phrase, and I said it in a guilty whisper. 미안해요. I'm so sorry. But Korean was not my first language. No, my first language was violence. My father, he taught it, and my mother, she translated it. The first words I remember were hajima, or stop. The first numbers I learned were gu, il, or 9, 1, and 1. I remember a day in '93, my father was practicing his linguistic skills, the language of his choice, physical violence with brutal fluency, and my mother was unwillfully translating his fists into feelings. But that day was my turn to show my family that I could speak too. I knew violence and I knew it well. And even though I was just 3 years old, I knew. I took my toy dinosaur, a long-necked brachiosaurus, and I swung it into my father's back like a battle axe. I was only 3, so the best I could do was hit his lower back. And though I'm a grown man now, I can never be tall enough or strong enough to swing an object capable of puncturing his fragile ego, his toxic masculinity, his damned sense of pride. And so, my mother and I left. We created our own 38th parallel, one family in 2 halves. And like the 38th parallel, this border served to protect Koreans from other Koreans. But no matter how well it was militarized, it never worked because fear knows no borders. If only we could afford a lawyer to put a restraining order against terror. Violence continued to be imported from father to mother and mother to me. We even learned to make it ourselves, and we traded it between us until our hands were bloody. No border is strong enough to protect us from our pasts. And now, my mother and I have our own 38th parallel to protect ourselves from each other. And whenever I look at my eyes, the gifts my parents gave me, I remind myself that I can't run from a border etched onto my own flesh. I can't forsake the violence that created this divide any more than I can escape my own skin. Whether I like it or not, I am son to them both. But I fear that if we continue to communicate with violence someday, we won't be able to communicate at all. I wish I could say that violence is not my mother tongue, but I simply don't know. The most important phrases I ever learned in Korean were yelled at me. No appa tak bistahe. You are just like your father. The most important Korean phrases I ever learned to speak were said in a guilty whisper. 미안해요. 잘못했다. 종sam합니다. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I'm so sorry. Thank you.